History is his story. We have to have all the perspectives to make a whole viewpoint on the experience of what that history really was. We're missing parts of the story. We're missing these atrocities that have happened to us, so that in today's day and age, a lot of people don't believe us what has happened because they don't have the knowledge of what has happened. They're not hearing our side of it. They're hearing only what's being taught to them, what's being shown to them through books, through media, through school. In California, right, we didn't have as many African American slaves, but we did have Chinese come in to help us build the railroads. But who was doing all that work was our California native peoples. We were indentured servants. We were the slaves that built this beautiful state of California. And so that needs to be known, so that we are given both the credit where credit is due, but also to understand where it is we're coming from as Native people when we are upset about things such as mascots and stereotyping and not getting our history out there, that we play a vital role, and we also gave our lives, and sometimes not in a positive way, to the growth of the state of California. There are current policies and there are past policies. Past policies that teachers need to understand is there are living people today that were affected by the boarding school policy, assimilation, the Dawes Act. There are many, many policies that really aren't spoken of that affect us and our neighbors and the teachers, and also it affects the teachers because they lack certain knowledge based on the policy of withholding information. So there are huge gaps in what really happened to us, atrocities between the gold greed and genocide, manifest destiny. You know, what is the Dawes Act? What is Assimilation Act? Assimilation Act was something that was created by Knox and Washington so that then we could be put into these boarding schools. They were run by the church. The United States paid the church to run boarding schools to then change the belief system of these generations of people for many, many generations. That is affecting us now. It's affecting us in our spiritual belief, how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, and all of those things that are missing from history would give teachers and also other students the capacity to understand better where we're coming from as human beings. My father went to boarding school, and the boarding schools originally were set up so that children on the reservation could be schooled. So the church helped run those to be able to teach the children how to read and write. But then the boarding schools became a major part of the assimilation policy. Assimilation policy is basically, we want you to be Americanized so that you can eventually maybe become a citizen. So you need to be like us, whatever that is. So whatever church was closest to you, whether it was Presbyterian, Catholic, Christian, all those different sects, all those different types of religion, ran the boarding schools for the different areas. So when they're run by these different religious factions, you are being taught whatever it is that is standard to that religion. So different boarding schools got different types of training. But the boarding schools for many people were also a very violent place. A place where they were abused, a place where they were told they were nothing, a place where they were physically, emotionally, sexually, all of those abuses took place in boarding schools. They were places that were close quarters, so a lot of the kids got TB, tuberculosis. Different children died in boarding schools. So all of these things was a separation of families from the peoples that went to the boarding school. It was a separation from your culture, from your homelands, from your language, from your family. All of that was part of that assimilation, and also to the demise and the erosion of what a true family was, and being part of a group as a Native American people. It was the breakdown of our society, and that was part of genocide, part of not being able to participate and be who we really are as human beings. And because of that, what also came out, aside from these, dysfunctional human beings, was dysfunction of the family. They weren't taught how to be mothers and fathers. They were nurturing children their own age and just trying to survive and get through. So because of that was a rise in PTSD, our post-traumatic stress disorder. It was part of our historical trauma. And this trauma was not that long ago, My father is still around. So how he participated as a father among thousands of other peoples, it changed how we nurtured our children. It changed how we were as people, or not knowing fully how to be a father because we weren't fathered or mothered. So all of that changed the face of Native Americans and that extended family group. We're all Californians. So how the policies were set in place years ago for the treatment of the people is the treatment of the land. And how we treat that land today is to the demise or the betterment of all. And you see what it's done to the Central Valley, San Joaquin, with all of the higher nitrates and salts in the actual soils because of those policies of the past, because the way they now run agriculture goes all the way back to federal Indian policy.
A lot of Native people have, but we're all doing so much at the same time, We're doing things to reclaim so many things that have been taken from us. So it almost becomes sometimes hard to be everywhere at once, doing everything, and ideally Native people would be, in every single, able to tell every single story that we experience, but also some of these things aren't meant to be told to outsiders as well. There's a lot of things that are meant to be internal for our own communities and that aren't meant to be shared. So I think it's a mixture of people not wanting to tell the story, but also if there was, a lot more Native people who can tell this, it might be a little bit easier, because there might be more, people who are able to do more outreach and all of that. But sometimes it can be hard because of a lot of reasons, But I think the first reason that's there really is people just not wanting to hear the story. Also, when we tell our story, we're telling a more truthful perspective because we know what our people experienced. We know this through the oral traditions. We know this through things that are recorded in our communities. We know this through things that were that have been written about and well published about the things that our ancestors had to experience in order for us to survive. And those things aren't going to be told correctly if they're told by somebody who's not Native. But teachers, they often are teaching, they're teaching what they're taught to teach, which is that we're gone. And it's harder, I think, for a lot of people to tackle the real issues about Indian people being enslaved, massacred, the genocide happening, the missions, and how we as people are still impacted by those things even to this day. That's not talked about because people don't want to talk about it.
Well, I think the teachers have to understand the history around the mission system, what Indians were subject to during the gold rush in the 1850s. And there are also things like the federal relocation program of the 1950s that created many Indians coming here from other states to find a new way of life.
So I think teachers need to go the extra mile in order to find alternatives. Like one of the great things that was created by CIMCC was the California Mission in Indian History website, where teachers can go and learn from Native people about voices of resistance, of survival, of continuity. Those things wouldn't be told unless teachers took the extra mile in order to look for those things, which is an unfortunate thing because they should be standard in all schools. But telling teachers, you know, be sensitive that there's Indian people that are alive, even, and it's just important to make sure that those stories are told in any way possible.